The term concept art brings to mind a specific kind of imagery. But isn't that a problem? What if the struggle of learning perspective drawing simply isn't worth it? How can an animated TV show be deeply autobiographical for its creator and still have huge mainstream appeal? Maybe what other people think of your art matters much less than you think. Today, in celebration of the new year, the Oatley Academy team shares their favorite books of 2017. Books that will almost certainly change your creative process.
Hello, and welcome to another ArtCast episode. I'm Ania Marques, Community Director for the Oatley Academy, and your host today. And with me right now, I have Chris Oatley, the Director of the Oatley Academy. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
So, on today's episode, we're doing something slightly different and special. We are calling some team members and asking what everybody's favorite book of 2017 is and why. Sarah Mills and Micah Van Hoffen are content creators for the Oatley Academy. Sarah is our primary content producer for The Magic Box, our course on digital painting. And Micah is our primary content producer for The Storyteller Summit, our course on storytelling. And after talking to Sarah and Micah, we will pass on to Edjua Ebeneba, also known as Edge, who is our technology director for the Oatley Academy. Right after talking to Edge, we will finally wrap up with an interview with Chris, and Chris will also interview me for my favorite book. And I can't wait to talk to you guys about it. It's really exciting.
And before we get started, we want to say that this episode is obviously very visual. And you might want to follow along by looking at previews of the books on Amazon.com or to look at some images from the internet that correspond to the books. So for your convenience, we compiled a list of Amazon links and images from the books when relevant at oatleyacademy.com/17 books. That's 17 books, BOOKS, just oatleyacademy.com/17 books. So if you purchase through that link, we get a small but helpful commission that will help to support this podcast and help to keep this podcast going. That money will go to hosting, production, editors, mixing, art, the production of the art for the show, promotion of the show. And if you could, while you're there, please leave us a comment and share your favorite book of 2017. And if you could, share the post on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you prefer. And that would be really helpful if you could help us promote the show in that way. To receive updates about any of our upcoming workshops or courses, you can go to oatleyacademy.com/courses. Click on the art for any of the courses that we offer about which you'd like to learn more. And that will take you to a place where you can sign up for an email list to receive notifications as soon as any of those courses or workshops open for enrollment. And I hope you enjoy this list of book recommendations from the OA team.
Okay, Sarah, so what book did you choose?
I chose They Drew as They Pleased, The Hidden Art of Disney's Golden Age. It's an art book, and it's amazing.
And what about you, Micah?
My favorite book of 2017 is The Noble Approach, Maurice Noble and the Zen of Animation Design by Todd Polson, and based on the notes of Maurice Noble.
Sarah, do you want to start and just tell us why you chose that book?
Sure, yeah. I chose this book because it fundamentally altered the way I think about concept art or visual development and sort of removed the contemporary leanings from my mindset. It's a book that details the work of the earliest concept artists for Disney before concept art was even a thing. That wasn't a job title. That wasn't an idea. It was just artists that Walt Disney picked because he wanted them to inspire the other artists at the studio and help make what we know as concept art. But back then, he just kind of invented the role. So their work is weird and fun and just like surrealist at times. And it's incredible to see early hints of the Disney style before Disney even really had a style. It's super cool.
What about you, Micah? Why did you choose the Noble approach?
This book not only features incredible background paintings and layouts by Maurice Noble, and for those who are not familiar with his work, he's a legend in terms of animation layout design. He worked on such classics as the Roadrunner cartoons, and he did work for Dumbo. And so this book not only has all of this incredible art in it, it also details Noble's step-by-step process on how he goes from script to thumbnails to finished layout. And what's really fascinating is how he is aware of the difference between style and creating a pretty image versus a layout and a background design that is appropriate for the story. So he really drills down on what makes a layout design work for the story.
So it's not for the sake of style?
Yeah. So Maurice Noble talks about avoiding pretties, and he defines pretties as lovely, often striking designs made for the sake of design, without any real thought to story, budget, or the needs of the picture. And he's really good at telling you a step-by-step process on how to create a background design or a layout that is based on story versus based on style.
And for you, Sarah, can you explore a bit more what you meant when you said what is concept art right now versus the pure former concept art in the 1930s that is depicted in the book?
Yeah, so I don't know about y'all, but for me, whenever someone says concept art or viz dev or whatever, there is a visual style that you can sort of drum up in your head. I'm imagining a concept art piece that's very loosely painted. There might be like textures and overlays with really blown out lighting. And maybe there's like, if it's a fantasy piece, there might be a little guy in a robe with a stick, or your generic space marine or whatever. And it's ironic that when we say the job title or the description of concept art, we think of a style or a singular image, but the point of that job title is to come up with new ideas, is to do things that we haven't seen before, and yet we're able to drum up this unified idea of what concept art looks like. And so for these early artists for Disney in the 1930s, there was none of that. They were completely untainted by what visual development was supposed to look like or what concept art was supposed to look like. And so they could just draw as they pleased and do sort of, really whatever they wanted to, untainted by anybody else's ideas.
And now jump to Maurice Noble, and he taught students. And so these notes that are in this book, or that led to the book and the process that is laid out in the book, he is telling his students how when they're doing research and are looking for inspiration, to be careful not to just use other animation productions as their inspiration and resources, because that is already filtered. Those designs are based on a different story and should only work for that story. And so to keep it fresh and original and really base your designs on the story at hand, he prefers to seek inspiration and seek research outside the field of animation and go to the source. Go to nature, go to different artists, different cultures. And so he has to make a point of telling his students, don't go down that rabbit hole of just copying what's been done before, where it seems in your book, it's more like they didn't even have that. That wasn't a thing at that time, and therefore they're creating freely.
Yeah, and that's so cool that he's bringing up looking at other cultures and other things, because all of these artists were, I think almost all of them were European. 3 out of 4, if not all 4, were European. And a lot of them they had some experience in animation, a few of them, but only for, one-off cartoons. This was like when Disney was moving from Steamboat Willie into Snow White. So like it wasn't possible to have a career as a visual development artist or a career in feature animation because it wasn't a thing. So he has kids book illustrators and commercial artists and just graphic designers, people like painting motifs on the inside of houses at some point. It's like it is the most pure form of inspiration coming from other places.
What would you call the most impactful tip the book has given you that you could apply right away?
In step number 3, in his step-by-step process, he talks about breaking down the elements. So once you've gone through the script and you've understood what the story is about, he makes a list of story elements that need to be designed. Backgrounds, characters, but also something like special effects, etc. And within that, he shares that he used to often start by designing the title card for a short. You know how Warner Bros. Cartoons, and I think to some extent the Disney shorts have that too, where they show you a title card. And so he would start with that first because it is the first impression of what is to come in the story. And so to design that first is to almost set the tone of the entire short. So if you can figure out the title card and the design elements, the design aesthetic, the font or the type, the shape language, and can portray all of that in one image, you know that you've understood the story. And you can also refer back to the title card with any subsequent designs to make sure that they match. And I thought, wow, that's kind of fascinating idea. And so I tried it for one of my projects that I'm currently working on, a graphic novel. And it was so hard. Like, I didn't think I would struggle with it so much. But there's something about having to break down your entire story into one image that makes you realize how many questions you have about your own project, not just in terms of the storytelling, characters and plot events, but also the tone. So the story that I'm working on is kind of a mystery. It's a detective story. And so then the question is, well, so how dark is this going? Like, how much mystery does the tone of the story carry in the visuals, etc.? And so, yeah, that was sort of fascinating. And I think I'm going to try that for every of my projects, even if the project in and of itself doesn't really require a title card. It's a really fun and challenging way to test out what your story is about.
Sarah, what about you? How has your book, your favorite book, informed your artistic decision-making process?
Well, this book came towards the tail end of our first flight workshop. And I was a coach for our group coaching sessions where we had students come every week or so and show their homework and what they've been working on so that we could all talk about it. And sort of a recurring theme in those conversations was this sort of asking permission or wanting to know if their ideas were acceptable or if they were the right ideas or if they were exploring in the right direction, instead of, when we would just let them know it's exploring in any direction. You need to explore all the possibilities. Every single one needs to be explored so that you can know for sure whether it's the right one. We talked a lot about breaking a character design or a design of anything, as in, pushing it so far until the drawing is not useful to you anymore, or until it doesn't look like the thing, or, just going way, way outlandish so that you can then reel it back in. You have to really understand the spectrum of like what's a tame and safe and predictable design versus what is so crazy and out of touch that it would never work, in order to fully calibrate where you want your design to be. And so we would have that conversation constantly with the students. I would tell them all the time, I want to see you break it. I want to see more. I want to see you explore different things, and it's like they were kind of asking, in a way, without using so many words, does this look like VizDev? Does this look acceptable?
Mm-hmm.
And so this book sort of reminds me there is no acceptable. The point of the job is to find the right idea by sifting through every possible idea and then finding the right one. It's not just, making a pretty picture like Micah was talking about pretties. There is some work in my book that I would say is pretty, but they only did that because they had the experience of all of the not pretties, the uglies, the surrealists, the broken images to let them know that, yes, this is the right idea. And this is really cemented by a quote in the beginning that says, if you want unique art, you'll find it takes a unique person to produce it. So that, coupled with all the conversations we've been having with students, with the amazing surrealist, but also gorgeous work that's in here, really helped me remember to break stuff, to not be afraid to have an opinion with your work and do crazy stuff and explore, because that's how you get the good stuff. It's not by playing it safe.
So the art in the book, then is it safe to say that it's not pretty, all of it?
Oh, yeah. Not by a long shot is all of it pretty. I mean, it's all interesting in a way. And there are some gorgeous illustrations in here. There are some compositions that are just like, some compositions that I find myself thinking about like weeks after I read this book, just like, oh yeah. I wanted to go and look at it again because it was so striking and such a good idea. But a lot of the art, it's mostly filled with, they call it the hidden art because it's been recently rediscovered. It's work that just got filed away in a drawer and forgotten about because it didn't seem important at the time. And so, so often with art books, like for a movie or a game, we see the really pretty, showy stuff. And we don't see the mountains of sketches that people have gone through, the weird stuff, the stuff that didn't fit in anywhere, the stuff that didn't make it to production. And we forget that that's a huge part of the process. But this book has all of that ugly stuff, that really weird, things that in the book, they can't even tag like what production it was made for because it bears no resemblance to anything that was ever produced because it's so outlandish and odd.
Thinking about our audience, why do you think they would like to own the Noble Approach?
I think our audience will love the Noble Approach because it is such a fantastic blend of beautiful artwork and the step-by-step process that you can follow along. And even the artwork is shown in a step-by-step way. So you get not only the finished, beautiful, colored backgrounds, but also the layout drawings and the multiple attempts and the tonal drawings. And so it's just really a great resource if you're interested in layout design and backgrounds, but also if you're interested in the creative process.
Wonderful. And what about you, Sarah? Why do you think we would like to have your beautiful book?
Well, I think if you, like me, are looking to refresh your ideas of what a concept artist or a VizDev artist is supposed to be, then this book will serve as lasting inspiration. Like we talked about earlier, it's got really weird one-off sketches and character designs and like surrealist things that serve no purpose, but it also has some really beautiful layout drawings and concept work that stuff from recognizable films like Fantasia and some of the Silly Symphonies, as well as Pinocchio. But it also details the lives of 4 of the earliest concept artists in a really interesting way to sort of, again, revitalize your idea of what it is to be a concept artist from their perspective.
Edge, tell me, what is your favorite book of 2017?
My favorite book is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a by Mark Manson.
And why did you choose that book?
So this year has been a pretty roller coasterly one for me. I'd say a lot of growth and a lot of ups and downs. And this book has been really helpful in giving me like the kick in the butt that I've needed to push through that emotionally.
Wow.
I'm generally a very sensitive person, as I'm sure everyone on the team also understands. We're all HSPs, I think, for the most part.
And by HSP, you mean highly sensitive person?
Yes, highly sensitive person, which means that inputs from the environment, for example, sounds or emotions or everything feels a lot more intense, I think, than it does for most people. So we're just more sensitive to stimuli than most people are. And so that means that when it comes to things like difficult circumstances and the emotions that come as a result, it can be very intense and very hard to manage. And that's led to me being very overwhelmed throughout my whole life. And this last year has not been much easier in that sense. So Chris actually suggested this book to me when I think I was talking to him about this exact thing, which was feeling overwhelmed and like, how do I balance my emotions more, and how do I push through what feels like a lot of just very difficult circumstances. And he suggested this to me, saying that it had helped him a lot. And I listened to it, and oh my gosh, it was such a motivating kick in the butt.
Oh, wow. And can you, I haven't read the book yet. When I said that, exactly, that's what Chris told me. I really want to read the book because it really sounds interesting. Can you give us an example of how the book helped you gain control over your emotions?
So one key concept that has really stuck with me is the idea that you don't control the circumstances that affect you in life, but you do control how you respond to it. And so you're not responsible for what happens to you, but you're responsible for how you react. And that was like a hard thing to hear, because it's very easy, I think, to feel like, just to feel like life is unfair and like, why am I going through this? Which is, it's not untrue, but at the same time, it happened. You can't move forward if you're constantly stuck in the unfair part. But you can move forward if you are able to reframe things and realize, okay, what can I take control of? And what you can take control of is your own reaction to things. And that was so helpful for me. Coming back around to the highly sensitive person thing, it's so, that external factor feels so overwhelming a lot of the time. And so to be able to steer away from that and find what within myself I can use to push back against that overwhelm has been really helpful for me.
Do you apply this to your art or plan to apply? Is there any relationship between that?
I would say there is, because so much of my art also is that overwhelm of not feeling good enough and feeling like I can, feeling like I'm not as good as I want to be, and that I'm behind in my art and that sort of thing. And that also feels overwhelming in terms of like, oh, how will I ever accomplish the goals that I have for my art in life? And so the same principle applies, which is, okay, well, I'm where I am right now with my art, and I have these abilities. What can I use within myself to push forward, as opposed to just dwelling in where I am right now?
So my last question to you is, who do you think this would make a great gift for?
I think anyone in your life who you see is struggling with this feeling of overwhelm and feeling like they're just pushing against so much and are unable to figure out how to find it within themselves to push back against that. And in addition to that, someone who is also motivated by the type of, like, I want to say harsh kick in the butt motivation, because that's not a style that helps everybody. Some people prefer softer, more gentle pushes along. I'm the kind of person who loves being told bluntly what the problem is and being pushed to solve it. If you see that in the person that you want to give this to, I would highly recommend giving it to them. I feel like it would be life-changing.
Anya, what's the title of your book?
The title of my book, which I'm holding in my hands dearly at the moment, stroking it and smiling. The book is called The Lines on Nana's Face, and that's by Simona Siraolo. For starters, I just want to say this is a very beautiful book that I wish I could just turn this podcast into a 5D experience, come out of your device to which you're listening to this episode and show it to you. The book is not only gorgeous to look at and to touch, there's a feel to it that is rather different than most books I see. I believe that's why I picked it up from the store, because there was just something about textures that I love so much, and I'm glad because I found the book. Just beautiful. The spine of the book has this beautiful cloth. It's just so nice to touch this book. And this children's book, it's really important for me because of the kind of story it is and how it is told. The whole story is just a conversation between a little girl and her grandmother. This book has very few words, but the amount of story in it is huge.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
so much story. And that's what made the click for me. So as some of you know, I'm working on my own children's book at the moment, and I've been fascinated by the children's book industry for a while now, and I really want to create my own books. And for a long time, I've been stuck, in which I have so much I feel I want to say, but I don't know exactly what I want to say. And I've been in this conundrum for a while, and it really unclogged something for me when I realized how powerful an everyday life story can be. That lit a light on my head.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, oh my God, that's the kind of work I want to do.
Yeah.
And you can do it. The proof is in the pudding. It's done. It's here. That's something that exists. You can actually do it.
Yeah, that's great. And so the book is in many ways an exploration of a single sort of visual aspect. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah. The whole story, or a big part of the story, is encapsulated on every single wrinkle of the grandmother's face. And every time the little kid points into one of the wrinkles, because she's curious of her grandmother, the little kid is not used to, I assume, looking at a lot of old people with a lot of wrinkles on their face. And the little kid is curious as to why the grandmother seems that she's smiling and sad and scared or surprised at the same time. Because she has so many wrinkles, it's hard to understand exactly what expressions she's making at any given time. Her grandmother tells her that every single wrinkle is a memory, is a story of hers.
Oh, God.
And that just completely like, and the magic happens. I mean, the magic happens when you touch the book. But for me, what really the wow moment for me was when the kid asked the grandmother, I don't believe you. So what does this one wrinkle, what does this line mean? And you turn the page and you have a beautiful, beautiful 2-page full spread illustration of a memory that tells you exactly a story of that grandmother's past with no words whatsoever. You don't need it. And the visuals of the book, that's another thing that really stuck with me.
Beautiful.
It does not look like it's drawn by a child. That's not what I mean. But the simplicity of the lines, and yet how much information it has with the simplicity is amazing.
Yeah.
The colors, they're vibrant, but they're not, too vibrant. They're just right. And then you have the difference in the palette between what's going on in real time and what's going on the memory, and how that breaks the pattern. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then something that really surprised me, and that I only got that after looking at the book for the 50th time, is you have perspective without having perspective in the book. And for me, that was amazing. It's not like I do not like perspective, I do. But when I was trying to unpack what I wanted to do with my children's book, and you helped me out a lot with that, Chris, when I showed you my portfolio this year and I was trying to figure out what was not clicking for me. You mentioned that for my art specifically, because I have such a strong background in design, I should try to explore designing the composition without actually just hinting at the perspective, not actually going for the full perspective there, because that's so much of what I'm inclined to do by myself without thinking. And there's so much of who I am there.
Yeah, right.
And this book is doing it in a different way of what I want to do, but it's doing it. It's different, but it's the principle is the same. And that blew my, that's probably one of the big reasons why I love the book so much. And I didn't get it until I actually started having conversations with you and the team. We are back to you, Chris. What is your favorite book of 2017?
Steven Universe, Art and Origins, written by Chris McDonnell, and it is by our friends at Abrams Publishing. And I guess before I go any further, I need to make a point here to thank them for sending us this beautiful review copy of the book. It is by far the clear winner for my favorite book of 2017.
Apart from being a super beautiful book, why did that make the pick as easy as you just mentioned?
I have a lot of beautiful art of books, right? But the thing about this Steven Universe book is that it's not just a history of the show. It's not just full of gorgeous artwork, and it certainly is. This thing is jam-packed with art. Almost every possible surface area on every page is covered in illustrations and sketches and backgrounds and layouts. I cannot believe how much art they managed to just physically fit onto the pages in this book. It is just jam-packed with art. So it's beautiful, but then it's also one of the most educational art of books you could buy. And that is because so it's an art book. It's also kind of a biography of the show's creator, Rebecca Sugar, who I hope we can have on the ArtCast someday in the near future. Rebecca, if there's any chance you're listening, please write us at support@chrisoatley.com, and we would give anything to talk to you about the show. And oh my goodness, it's just so beautiful. I'm like flipping through now, and I'm losing my train of thought because I'm just mesmerized by the beautiful art. Oh goodness gracious, this is the most gorgeous show. But then, so it's also kind of a biography of Rebecca, and in that sense, it's very revelatory of the show, because you can see how a show can be a massive success and extremely personal. You know, it can have all this wide, mainstream appeal and still be very personal, a very personal creation. So that's really educational. And pretty much the entire text portion of the book is formatted like an interview. So it's like the author is interviewing Rebecca and other people that worked on the show. And so that has a very personal feel to it. It also has a very exciting behind the scenes sort of firsthand account of the creative process of creating the show, which brings me to two more points about why it's so much more than an art book, really. If you've ever wondered how to make a hit animated TV show, if you've ever wondered how a hit animated TV show gets made, what the actual process of making a show is like, I don't know if I've ever seen a more accurate, a more thorough, or a more visual document, really, of the making of a show, and that it's amazing in that way. It has all these, just page after page of these selections from Rebecca's sketchbook and her journals that she was keeping as she was developing the show. So there are all these early versions of character designs and character ideas and plots and background and world building and all that stuff. There's just so much on character design alone. The character development process was very thorough, and as even probably casual fans of the show know already, there is a pilot episode which is hilarious. It's amazing. The pilot episode is out there, and in the pilot episode, the characters look very different from the way they look in the series proper. And so you have the whole character design process represented for the pilot, but then also how they evolve the characters for the series itself. Just story after story after story of, making Steven Universe, specifically of what it's like to make a show, of what it's like to be inside the mind of one of the most brilliant animation creators working today, in that there you get all the journals and sketchbook stuff from Rebecca. It's awesome to see the process of revision. That's another thing that's just hardly ever really reflected in art of books, is you getting a sense of what the original artist probably did, and then what the art director came along and changed, or what Rebecca came along and changed. And so you see all these sort of work in progress versions of the designs, and so you get a sense of how things actually evolved. So it's full of gorgeous art, full of gorgeous character designs. The backgrounds, as anyone who's seen the show knows that this show has some of the most gorgeous backgrounds in any animated series ever, and so there's all the insight about making those, but then just yes, the level, the amount of just pure sort of unedited raw information about making an animated show it's just off the charts. I've never seen an art book like it. That's for sure.
How did the book help you with the workshops that we have been working on? First Flight, It's Alive.
Well, I mean, it provided insight into the design of what I think is one of the most beautiful shows on TV. In First Flight, for example, we unfortunately that workshop is now closed for enrollment, and it won't be open again for quite some time, probably not until 2019, unfortunately. But we of course will let everyone know through our email newsletter as soon as it's getting ready to open again. But but Steven Universe is a great example of a concept that we teach in First Flight. That concept is called emotional geography. And this is the idea that the environment design in a story can, and in animation perhaps should, be a visual representation of the emotional experience of the character or characters. Mm-hmm. And most primarily your protagonist. And Steven Universe is a great example of that. And of course, we go into great depth about that concept in the First Flight workshop, but Steven Universe provided a great example of emotional geography to support our environment lessons in First Flight. For It's Alive, and again, that's the character design workshop that we will be offering in the spring of 2018. This book provides great insight into the character design process for TV specifically. Mm-hmm. It's a lot harder to find information, let alone information this thorough, about the process for designing characters for TV shows. And, there are all kinds of art books for features, but TV shows are a little harder to come by. So it's not only great to have a book about such a beautiful animated TV series, but it's great to have a book that is so thorough in that regard. And so, yes, for It's Alive, we want to represent as many different types of character design, professional character design as possible. And so that, of course, would include TV animation.
Wonderful. You also mentioned that there's a lot of great information in the book about pitching.
Oh, yeah.
So I was wondering, what impact did this book have in the way you think about pitching?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great. It encouraged me to challenge my students and people who write me about how to create animated TV show pitches. It inspired me and encouraged me to challenge them to be more honest. I think typically that's a very typical thing, is that people write me and with these ideas about animated shows, and rarely do I ever see one that almost never do I ever see one where I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great idea for a TV show. They always feel dishonest in some way. They always feel like, the thing that the creator thinks the network wants to see, rather than just being this thing that is just raw and honest and truly creative and insightful. And looking at Rebecca's process for creating this show, it's amazing in its honesty. It's amazing how raw and truthful and just from the heart, maybe even from the guts, this show really is. And yet, like I said, the irony is that it is this huge mainstream hit. Now, not every TV show is going to be as big a hit as Steven Universe, and I don't even think that's the goal. I think the goal is to, create something that is financially sustainable for the network or streaming service on which it is available, and to connect with your audience, to make a difference in their lives. It doesn't have to be as big a hit as Steven Universe, but certainly Steven Universe has a lot to teach us. And certainly Rebecca and her crew have a lot of insight to provide that will help us be much more honest, dig much deeper when we are creating pitches for animated TV shows.
Yeah, and I agree. I was just watching one episode of Steven Universe the other day, and it really hit home. I really loved it.
Yeah, it's an amazing show. It's amazing.
And with all that amazing content that the book has, what do you think would be the most impactful tip that you could apply right away? You practically already shared one as I was asking you about the pitching.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's a relevant bit of advice, and a very important bit of advice, which is to be brutally honest in the creation of your own show. But the book is also full of just nuts and bolts process stuff. So, for example, they have these character designs that they're working on, and you might have seen this method. I don't even know if you can call it a method, but you might have seen this habit reflected in, for example, Peter Emmerich's work and the work of his crew over at DreamWorks on the project. I don't think it's been announced yet, but the project that they're all working on. But they've been posting on Instagram about this and this process, and they'll take a character design and they'll just alter the character design, not by drawing over or tracing the original design, but just by taking that white sketchbook page and laying a Post-it note over half the character design and just redrawing part of the character design just on this Post-it note. So you just have this big yellow square right in the middle of your character design, just with the redraw on top of that. And they're just like, whatever's fast and process based, it's this idea that a character design is sort of a perpetual work in progress. Wow. And yeah, so just stuff like that. The book is just full of things. And I don't know, I don't think anybody mentions that Post-it note technique, I guess. It doesn't feel, it's so sort of matter of fact, it doesn't even feel like a technique, but that sort of practice there of using the Post-it notes, that's all through the book. I don't think anyone even acknowledges it in the book, but just seeing it visually just gives you new ideas about how to work. So it's cover to cover, it's full of that kind of thing. Wow. Just ways to get you thinking differently about your work. And something that's so difficult to communicate is what we mean when we talk to our students about hard work. And a lot of people think that means, just moving the brush harder, faster, and longer, just putting in more hours behind the screen. And while sometimes it is that, sometimes I just have students that just need to spend more time with the butt in the seat. It like really is just if you really want to do this as a profession, you got to just sit down and and do the work. That is the case sometimes, but not all the time, not always. Sometimes it's working harder is being more honest, dealing with that. Man, am I really going to dig into the stuff that I'm afraid to share about my life? But the truth is there are lots of people out there who have that same struggle and that same vulnerability, and they're going to respond to that because they in fact need me to be honest about this. Maybe that's sometimes harder work. Sometimes hard work is sustaining, kind of tolerating and deliberately sustaining an unfinished project, an unfinished element within your project. So a character design, for example, that's a thing that people just don't, people get in such a rush, they get in such a rush to just finish something or not actually finish it. That's the irony. It's not actually finished. You just called it finished and put a clean line on it or something. And it's like, well, no, it's not finished. That's the problem. It looks amateurish or it looks studenty or whatever, and then you have these, cover to cover, these designs in the Steven Universe book that look beautiful and look completely finished, and yet it's got this big yellow Post-it note right in the middle of it, and it's drawn in Sharpie marker, So yeah, I think that's the other thing, is it's just full of great kind of workflow tips and workflow tips that imply a very this very strong sense that, oh my God, you don't get in a rush. Don't try to call it finished too soon. If you think it's done, it's probably not.
Let's tweet that. If you think it's done, it's probably not, Chris.
Yeah, that's often the case with students. Often the case with students. In the industry, people are used to that. You go into an animation studio and people are always just assuming that something's not done. It's kind of just the way it goes. But students often get in a rush, and the work suffers for it. Yeah, so the book models that beautifully and thoroughly, and I love it.
Okay, friends, and we are wrapping up the episode. As a reminder, please join us at oatleyacademy.com/17 books. That's the numbers 17 in books, BOOKS. And join the conversation in the comments. And if you can, please share the post on social media to help promote the show. And until next time, stay strong and stay close.